But now we have the two poster cards of Chilling Reign about to go off against each other, Ice Rider versus Shadow Rider, and they're also the two most popular decks of this tournament, which I don't think is much of a surprise. They both have very ironed out lists for the archetypes because they're being played so much and being so successful in these online metagames that are forming. And they're typically pretty consistent decks as well. So do you think there's a favor, in your opinion, between Ice Rider versus the Shadow Rider?
I know people have been fighting about this back and forth. I've tried to stay off Twitter as much as possible the last month, been doing a little bit of a cleanse, but I've seen the fighting of Ice Tray versus whatever they wanted to call Shadow Rider this week. And it's in my opinion, it just comes down to the starts. It's so many games, it just ends up being which horse deck was able to get the most down turn.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there obviously is a lot more complications to that, but if I was witnessing what happens time that I see one or the other deck lose, it's because of a faltered start. So it is going to be interesting to see exactly what the starts look like from both players in this matchup, in my opinion.
Yeah, and speaking of a faltered start, we have Shadow Rider going first, attach an energy to Gengar Mimikyu, a pretty early air balloon, premature I might even say, and then an evolution incense to get nothing, and there's why that premature air balloon happened, because of the Dene GX is coming down following the evolution incense, hoping to get down maybe one Calyrex V, two Calyrex V, can we make it
Ooh,
three? So just like that, oh, okay, we might be making it
yeah.
three, or an alcremie, perhaps. So quite the start there off of that, the Dene GX, the Shadow Rider player not being able to play a supporter, but still getting quite a good start and setting up to be able to play a 2 energy horror house, which is ideal, and it is going to be a third Calyrex coming down.
Yeah, and that just is so huge. Going from what it looked like, not maybe being able to get a Calyrex into play into getting three is drastic. And with Marnie even giving additional cards here, it's going to be very interesting. And Quick Ball discarding Quick Ball, not exactly to see here. But we do see that keep calling attack going ahead and grabbing three additional Sobble so that those Drizziles do have Pokemon to evolve this turn.
Now, having been playing mostly Shadow Rider decks for this standard format, I know this turn and the sequence of events that could very well happen all too well is that the Shadow Rider player wants to do this turn to 2 energy Poltergeist to force the Ice Rider player up to a 7 card hand. And they're also going to get to draw some cards to hopefully get out of this Path to the Peak lock, which should be pretty easy for them because they are playing 2 stadiums and 2 Marshadows. So, and those Marshadows, of course, they have extra outs with that because of Fog Crystal and Quick Ball. And my next point was going to be they want to find a boss's orders next turn so they can knock out this Ice Rider potentially. They do find the boss's orders early prior to the 2 energy horror house. But unbeknownst to the Shadow Rider player, Ice Rider has lucked out with a 2 energy hand here.
Yeah, I think they're getting ready to find out real quick that this is only going to be doing 100 damage to the active Ice Rider Calyrex and potentially set up for a, a Melanie play if not something else. Because with Drizzile being able to access anything in the entire deck, there's a whole lot of different things that can take place here. We do see some underworld doors now that Path to the Peak has been moved out of the way so that Calyrex can get some additional energy cards into play here. But with those 8 cards in hand and only 2 being trainer cards, that is going to be a big deal that Calyrex is only going to be taking 100 damage here from a Poltergeist.
Yeah, 2 energy horror house going into just 100 damage, and they use the boss's orders to try to make this happen. 100 damage on a Calyrex vmax is honestly pretty much perfect. If you're going to set up for a 2-shot, 100 damage is a very nice chunk of damage. It leaves alcremie ready to knock it out, or even in the later game, if this Ice Rider were just for some reason go to the bench, a Shadow Rider could even knock it out with Max Geist after 100 damage. But the real issue here is that Gengar is most likely going to be knocked out by Max Lance for 3 prizes.
Yeah, and we do see these Drizziles coming out here, filtering out some cards from the deck, making sure that that Melanie does get into play here, so that we are able to into Ice Rider Calyrex. This Max Lance gonna be able to take the KO onto Gengar. So not only was Gengar not able to take KO on Calyrex, but Calyrex was able to facilitate that Melanie play, which let the KO follow back onto Gengar. So while the Shadow Rider player obviously isn't out of the tempo is firmly in Ice Rider's favor at this point.
I really like this display that this sequence of events that have occurred puts on, because you'll often hear players saying that Horror House GX is one of the most toxic parts of the standard format. Now, of course, you know, there's always going to be a most toxic part of a format, but Horror House does feel especially bad because it literally leaves you not being able to play cards. You've heard players say from the history of the game, you know, oh, I wasn't able to do anything. Well, Horror House literally leaves you not doing anything. But it's kind of made out to be an always winning situation for the Horror House, and the Shadow Rider really did get exactly what they wanted. They got the turn 2 energy Horror House. They had the boss's orders to bring up the only V, but it still didn't work out for them, and they actually got punished by a high roll in the opponent's favor. So I do think this really puts on a nice display of how that aggressive attack that players kind of look at as a guaranteed certainty could really backfire, since Gengar is a tag team giving up 3 prizes for just 1 attack from Ice Rider.
Yeah, and we do see the Alcremie VMAX actually come down on the opposing bench. That does give the option to do a big KO onto an Ice Rider Calyrex at some point, should the player choose to take that route. But it is interesting to be able to have that KO on a deck like this, where you may not have as many with something like a Max Geist, but we do see the Gmax Whisk go ahead and come out here, and that is going to go ahead and do enough damage to end that Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX.
Yeah, it does just so happen that Drizzile evolves into a very good card called Inteleon that does exactly double of what Drizzile does. And although that Marnie hurt a little bit, we do see the Ice Rider player has an Evolution Incense. So that just grabs an Inteleon from Sword and Shield and should be able to get exactly what they need with that.
Yeah, and with the level ball being top decked there to be able to get another Rizile as well, we be able to see a multitude of their players' trainer cards be able to be selected and formulate the turn that they really want playing here. As we do see
Yeah,
Path to the Peak and Melanie potentially be the choices here. Um, and we actually see a quick ball with Melanie. Melanie being the important one here, being able to attach to the Calyrex V. As we see, it looks like we're actually going to see an Aqua Bullet potentially.
very
Drizzile,
nice.
Drizzile going to go ahead and come down here and grab Path to the Peak. As we see that interplay to go ahead and shut down that Shadow Rider Calyrex ability.
I'm kind of wondering if that quick ball was just like because the timer scared them or something. I was thinking you just grab your Evolution Incense with that, then see what you get off of Melanie prior to playing the Drizzile. And then you could always just get a quick ball if you need it off the Evolution Incense for Drizzile, but you could also, with that, turn that Evolution Incense into a reset stamp to pair with the Path to the Peak. But I suppose the only real threat, and is it really even a threat, would be they bump the path, get boss, a bunch of energy, knock out a V, but as long as they can Evolution Incense for Melanie, which they can as long as their 4th Drizzile is in the deck. I did notice that they don't have another Inteleon in the deck. As long as they have their last Drizzile, then I do think they've mapped this out quite well to guarantee the game, save for another Marnie.
Yeah, and we do see the Shadow Rider player continue their board, um, grabbing a psychic energy with a fog crystal there. And still not a tray or a stadium card or a Marshadow to be that path yet, but maybe we'll hit one off of this professor's research here to unlock those abilities once again. As we see the nope, just in training court immediately hitting the field to go ahead and bump that path to the and Underworld Door gonna go ahead and attach an energy immediately. Now that that ability has been unlocked, as we see only 6 cards left in the Shadow Rider player's deck.
Yeah, and I did want to just double check the Ice Riders list. They are only playing 2 Inteleon, and both are the Sword and Shield Inteleon that has the Shady Dealing. So they do have one prized, and the one that was in the deck is the one we see on the board there. But quite interesting to see Aqua Bullet being used, because typically I only see that used versus Decidueye and versus some like rogue single prizer decks. But you know, doing 250 twice or doing 120 and 250 are both essentially the same thing versus a vmax.
Yeah, and just being able to do that with a one prizer that just continues to apply pressure if they don't deal with it, if they choose to not deal with it, like a boss's orders or something. As we do see Reset Stamp actually going to go ahead and reset that hand down to.
Oh, beautiful draws though.
Yep, literally could not draw that up to be better actually.
Oh no, wait, no, they could have. That actually definitely could have been better because they needed a boss. I'm sorry.
That is true.
They needed boss, not Melanie.
But we do see, could they potentially still be fine due to the training court?
So they can't win this turn.
Sure.
They can bump. They can put Path to the Peak out and hope that the opponent does not get a boss. And there's the boss, one of the next cards on top of the deck. Now let's see if Ice Rider's playing Reset Stamp. They are playing one, and I can't recall if they've played their single Reset Stamp yet.
I was very afraid for a second that we were actually going to see a pierce there from the Ice Rider calyrex. As we see in the attachment actually coming down on the benched calyrex V, it seems. And it looks like we're actually going to see a retreat here.
Yeah, forcing them to have the boss.
Yeah. As we see that Path to the Peak.
Even leaving just the vmax active could have led to a knockout.
And we do see Marshadow here to take care of that Path to the Peak.
Yeah, my question is, how many energy do they have in their hands right now to draw some more cards?
Yeah, and we do only have the, I guess now we have 5 cards left in our deck. 4 now, once again, once Crobat comes back out with Pokemon Communication.
And now, are they out of boss, the Shadow Rider? Let's see how many boss. They are playing 3 bosses orders. And, oh, so there's the answer to that. They are not out of boss.
We do see 0 cards left in their deck, so we better see the end of a game here.
Yeah, and that's going to be the end of the game with the alcremie if they hard retreat. Or actually, no, just Max Geist as well would also take the knockout there.
Take out that Ice Raider calyrex V for the knockout and the game. As we see that Max Geist do just that with 0 cards remaining, but in that final turn.
You know, for a 3 prize beater versus a 3 prize amalgamation of many strong cards of the past, you know, these are pretty monstrous, obnoxious cards we're dealing with here, but it was a nice back and forth of a game. I must say, I think, and I do think that comes from the Inteleon stage 2 line being a crucial part of the Ice Rider, and also Calyrex not being its own main attacker, kind of sharing the spotlight with Alcremie.
Yeah, just being able to utilize decks that function on multiple different axes. Being able to have so many choices per game through all of the Drizzile and Inteleon effects, and having to evolve to be able to facilitate that, taking up so much space in the deck. But it's just very interesting to see decks being built like that. It very much reminds me of a lot of the old days. And like you were saying, even on the other side of the Rider, while Shadow Rider Calyrex definitely can attack, definitely can do a lot of damage, you'll win a lot of games just attacking with Shadow Rider. You do see a multitude of different attacks get utilized on that side of the field between Gengar's attack. You'll see both attacks on the baby Shadow Rider get utilized.
Hmm.
You a lot of times you'll see Trevenant Dusk Noir, things like that. Zapdos with Aurora Energy a lot of the time. There's so many different options, so many different that deck, and it's just always interesting to be able to see on both sides of the table these Pokemon evolving and different things going on.
I agree. Now, in that last game, did you catch anything that Ice Rider did that you think could have been done a little differently? Because I really felt like that was going to be Ice Rider's game, and in my mind, I only just remembered them getting reset stamped to not the right cards, and that was kind of what did it. Because prior to that reset stamp to 3 and them not having the boss, it did look pretty good for Ice Rider. I'm wondering if they need to do something differently this time.
Yeah, I'm not thinking that they did anything inherently wrong. As we do see, unfortunately, this horror house leaving just the one Pokemon in play. As the Shadow Rider player is able to produce an entire board before there's even other Pokemon able to get down on the other side. Now, we do avoid the situation of being just poltergeisted out of the game by only being able to take 150 damage with 3 trainer cards out of the 7 cards in hand, but we are on a pretty dicey area here, from the Ice Rider perspective with no board and Shadow Rider still being able to take their turn.
I think I feel pretty good here as Ice Rider. So they played the Evolution Incense down turn 0, or no, turn 1, going second, going first. They played down the Evolution Incense to get a trainer card out of their hand, and they replaced it with an Ice Rider. So they have the VMAX to evolve next turn because they didn't already have one anyway. But now that all of that's a moot point actually, because um now we've just got, it looks like there won't be an attack happening, or at least not a very good attack from the Ice Rider side. And thinking about the decision to do that, Marnie, I think that the Shadow Rider player noted that Ice Rider did not, nor that the Ice Rider player decided to play out that Evolution Incense. And the Shadow
Mhm.
Rider player took that as, okay, this Evolution Incense is the difference between them being knocked out or not. So I'm not going to get
Yeah.
the knockout, and I'm not going to leave that Gengar out again like I did last time.
Yeah, as we see Crobat V come into play here to go ahead and draw cards, but not really leading anywhere after that. We do see an Evolution Instance grabbing the Ice Rider Calyrex Max. Gonna go ahead and evolve the active, attach Path to the Peak, and Road of the High King to go ahead and get the knockout on the Shadow here. Taking an Evolution Instance off of the prizes, which is not that second Sobble in play, as we see Gengar being promoted once again, having taken that 40 damage, which usually not too relevant in this matchup since you do your damage in increments of 240.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have that underworld door going to go ahead and draw some cards since the other Marshadow was able to take care of that second copy of Path to the Peak.
Yeah, Ice Rider is actually in a really great position because Shadow never found an Alcremie V. Now I do
Yep.
believe this Shadow Rider deck is only playing a single. Yeah, they're playing 1/1 Alcremie V. And if they were able to get down an Alcremie V turn 1, that donk could have happened. The game could have been over on turn 2, because they could have essentially retreated and discard all of their energy to just guarantee a knockout instead of leaving it to chance with Poltergeist. And here, again, they could be threatening a one-shot potentially, or threatening a one-shot on a healthy Cali potentially next turn if they were getting alcremie set up. So I've got to wonder, is that alcremie V prized, or is the alcremie V max prized so they're not getting the alcremie V, or maybe simply they just can't get into an extra quick ball or fog crystal for it.
Yeah, as there's the fog crystal, so here's the chance. Alcremie, this is the opportunity to get it into the hand and get it into play.
Yeah, if I don't see alcremie V here, I'm thinking it's prized,
And just an actual fail, not getting anything with the fog crystal, an energy or a Pokemon.
yeah, definitely not what I was expecting.
We see another fog crystal come out here, and that one is going to go back into the deck with ordinary rod.
Yeah, so I think Ice Rider would, in theory, Ice Rider should be on the back footing here, but having the Shadow Rider player not have access to Alcremie V, at least what we assume they don't have access to it, that's probably going to at least even out the game here, in my opinion. And another thing is, unfortunately, I don't think taking that one prize on the Mars Shadow probably mattered too much, because it looks like we're probably going to be trying to knock out 2-3 prize Pokemon from Ice Rider's side of things. Or not. I'll take that back. It looks like Mars Shadow was a great thing to knock out, James, and I'm just going to let Ice Rider do its stuff.
All right, we see Boss's order is going to go ahead and come out and take out that Shadow Rider Calyrex V on the bench, leaving the Ice Rider player with only 3 prize cards remaining. So they will just need to knock out the singular 3 prize Pokemon. Very much so trying to hunt down that Gengar Mimikyu tag team on the bench. As we do see Alcremie finally enter play, so it was around this whole time, but just now entering play as we see Air Balloon hit the active to go ahead and be able to float that Calyrex back to the bench.
Do you perhaps think they didn't want to play it down and have it get bossed, and so they wanted to wait to see a boss be played first? That's
Potentially, but
really,
that would only make sense if the vmax was also prized, because otherwise you would just try and get it down and then maybe just evolve it, like you would try and get it down on turn 1 or something, and then
yeah, like the
immediately.
horror house turn. So that is peculiar. I
Yeah.
wonder if the Shadow Rider player had a plan, and if that's a plan we're not seeing, or if it is just inherently a misplay, not putting down the Alchemy V earlier. But the Alchemy V is now down. Ice Rider has win potential on board with Gengar VMAX being a 3 prize Pokemon.
Yeah, and with that energy in play, I mean, we see the Inteleon in hand, so we'd be able to evolve into Inteleon. Inteleon can grab Boss's orders and an energy spinner, and then that could just be the game right there. With the Inteleon in hand and those 3 max guys take KO in the active, and I do believe that that just is the final play of the game.
Yeah, I think Ice Rider's playing 2 or 3 Capacious Buckets, so as long as one
Oh
of those
yeah,
are in the deck, then we're good to go.
yeah.
Yeah, they're playing 2 Capacious Buckets, so, and there's
Yep,
both of
there's the
them.
bucket and there's the boss.
And there's the
So
boss, the old bucket and boss combo.
yep, Lysander grabbing the bucket, grabbing those water energy, and throwing them at that Gengar as we see Ice Rider take the win over Shadow Rider in this thrilling victory for the Max Lance and the finale to that game.
You know, James, what's really fun to me about these 2 games so far is in game 1, I would have put my money on Ice Rider after seeing the first couple turns, and Shadow won. And in game 2, it looked very, very poor for Ice Rider, but Ice Rider ended up winning.
Yep.
And so, you know, as much, again, as much as we say the game looks very linear right now, sure, the games are shorter, but I think that there were some turnarounds happening in both of those games. So I'm quite excited to see what happens here in game 3.
Yeah, there were definitely some ups and downs, some definitely some choices being made on both sides, some things getting hit, some things not getting hit. It's definitely a dynamic game state as we do see the Marshadow start from the Shadow Rider side of things and the Ice Rider Calyrex on this side. It looks like Shadow Rider is going to start us off here with the first turn as they ponder their opening draw.
Yeah, the two big cards of Chilling Reign here facing off in game 3, seeing which one of these players will go into the finals. And let's see if our other top 4 has a victor quite yet. They do not, but the other side of top 4 is Rapid Strike Urshifu versus another Shadow Rider. So we could end up seeing another Ice Rider versus Shadow in finals. We could end up seeing Shadow versus Shadow in finals. Or there could only be one horse versus Battle Styles face card in the finals of this event. But
Yeah, we could find out who wins between Battle Styles and Killing Rain.
we do have a handful of pretty popular vmaxes here in the mix of things. And honestly, I do kind of like all 3 of these decks. I don't really mind watching any of them play.
Yeah,
let's
I
see
mean,
what
they all if those are the trio of decks at any given time in a format, I'm more fine with. I mean, all 3 decks play on very fair axis, and what I mean by that is that trying to attack and win prizes. They aren't trying to do anything too ridiculously interesting, beyond or crazy, I should say. They all just very much know what they're doing and what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, now the turn 1 from Shadow Rider, pretty good. Doesn't get the alcremie down, doesn't get the second Cali down, but you know, Gengar and a Cali will typically be quite enough for Shadow Rider. And Ice Rider, I wondered, they are playing their hands with Poltergeist in mind, right? Because the thing is, you have to know and play against Poltergeist a turn ahead, because you don't get instant reaction due to Horror House.
Yeah.
And so I do think some of it is fortunate that the Ice Rider player is not getting hands full of supporters. But you'll notice they're also playing some of their ball search cards suboptimally premature, just so they
Yeah.
don't get stuck with them in hand. So that's a really good skill to have, to know that 99% of the time you don't want to play these ball search cards early and not actually get maximum use or have all of your options available, but they're doing it on purpose because of the Horror House.
Yeah, as we do see that Horror House GX come out and force just a Pierce for the only move Ice Rider deck here. Now, do you like that attack, or do you like potentially retreating back into one of the other Pokemon?
Well, you know, not retreating is kind of, you know, putting it all on the table. You're telling the opponent, you're playing, if I'm doing that, I'm playing some mind games with the opponent, I think, because that 40 damage doesn't matter. I'm either discarding 2 energy to knock it out, or I'm not knocking it out.
Yeah.
But that, it's playing mind games with the opponent to make them think, okay, do they not have enough trainers in the hand and that's why they left it out there? Or is that what they want me to think, but they really have a handful of supporters and I'm going to knock out this Ice Rider? I think it really opens up a little bit of you know, actual meta game, a game within the game of just playing those, uh giving your opponent kind of a puzzle to figure out about what's in your hand, that they really don't have factual knowledge to go off of.
Agreed. As we do see a Max Geist come out instead of taking the chance with Poltergeist there. And it looks like we are going to see a Drizzile Evolution deck for any trainer card here. And it looks like we are going to be grabbing a Quick Ball potentially with that.
Yeah, and we do have another Drizzle in hand that we can evolve. Now, let me ask, if Boss's Order is going to get played here, which we don't know if it's going to be. I'm also not sure if I like this Quick Ball, but we'll get there when we get there. Let's say they do play a Boss's Order this turn. Would you want to knock out the Alcremie or the Gengar?
I think that you have to go after the Alcremie. The reason for that is that Alcremie does grow to be bigger, but that Gengar is always going to be on the board as what it is. Even though it does have that energy, we already have shown that we can play around that Poltergeist in most situations, and most certainly this hand, it looks like we would be able to facilitate as much as possible to play around that. But that Alcremie, since that is essentially a ticking time bomb there, where once that evolves, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get a KO within a reasonable amount of time, where that Gengar just sitting there on the bench being a final 3 prizes to take at any given time is definitely relevant.
Now,
And we see a discard there into the front,
yeah,
actually.
the Glacial Lance. They chose to use Melanie as their supporter for turn, while also getting a third Ice Rider Calyrex V down. And this was a very out of the way line of play that I originally thought was a misstep by the Ice Rider pilot until they attached the third energy to the active Ice Rider Calyrex V, and it became clear that they wanted to use the V as its own attacker to give up a 2-prize attacker and then force at least 2 more knockouts to finish up the game, which this was not the first play I thought of. I was originally thinking of targeting down that Alcremie, but if you don't have a VMAX on the board, I guess the Alcremie is not too much of a threat quite yet.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And I do think that it does overall make sense. However, this play kind of locks us into using Melon next turn, which is kind of interesting because we'll need to utilize probably that evolution instant to acquire a uh, Ice Rider VMAX, and then the level ball to Drizzile, Drizzile to get Melanie, Melanie to attach an energy from the discard pile and draw 3. But then we're also still going to need another energy. So I guess we could utilize evolution incense instead on to Inteleon, grab another instance to get the shadow or the ice rider, and then move on. But it looks like we've opted to do 190 to the binged Calyrex V there.
Yeah, this is one that's making me think just for a moment, is that, did they miscount? Did they think that was a knockout? Or is that actually a good play?
Yeah, as we see Inteleon shady dealings come out here, and Inteleon twice as good at this as Drizzile is. It's able to pull out 2 trainer cards, so able to grab that Ice Rider Calyrex V, and Melanie's going to go ahead and attach to the active. Going to go ahead and attach there, and it looks like we will see a KO here.
Yeah, with Ride of the High King doing 130 damage. And this is quickly looking like Ice Rider's in a very comfortable position. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe Shadow Rider is down their reset stamp this game. So we know that game one, like I said, it looked very good for Ice Rider to start things out, and then a reset stamp turned that all around. And here we go.
Yep. Yeah, yep, and there it is. So let's see what we get dished back out. And Boss's orders, Capacious Bucket, and Ice Rider Calyrex, not exactly cards you really want in hand.
Again, we're 1 card off, just like last time. Last time we had the incense for the VMAX, and we had the energy,
Mm-hmm.
but we didn't have the boss. And now this time we're missing the VMAX.
Yep, as we see Marshadow go ahead and reset that path to the peak here, allowing for Underworld Door once again to get the energy and cards flow. Shadow Rider. It once again, seems like a back and forth game. There's interaction, there's things going on. Set stamp is deciding games. Players are having to preemptively utilize their cards to play around certain effects. That a lot going on here.
Yeah, there is a lot going on here. Um, so it's all going to come down to this top deck. We need an out to an evolution Pokemon, or we need an evolution Pokemon. Any will do. Drizzle will do, and Teleon will do. Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX will do quite fine.
Yep, and for turn we end
It's a
up
level
getting a
ball.
level ball. So that is
Is
going to
there
be able
ever
to start the chain.
there's then so it's level ball for Drizzile, Drizzile for Incense, Incense for Calyrex VMAX, and then Capacious Bucket for Water Energy. And we're going to see the game go to Ice Rider after that chain of events.
There we are. So there's the incense. grab the Ice Rider, Capacious Bucket, grab the energy, attach the energy. Boss's orders up the Gengar, and Max Lance for the knockout the game. And finals, Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX goes galloping away frostily.
Yeah, Calyrex, going with Glastrier is the correct option today, it seems like, in this matchup between the two horses from Chilling Reign. So James and I are going to take a quick break before finals and see who won on the other side of top four, and then we'll be bringing you the final match of the first ever Celiostats tournament held on play.limitlesstcg.com. I'm Luke Morsa. James Arnold is by my side casting, and we'll be back in just a few. Don't go anywhere.